So I normally don't do React content. I'm not a React Andy. I'm not Asmongold. He's the god. But let's watch a video from Woody. People said that they really liked this video. So let's check it out. It's his season 4 wish list, and it's 24 minutes long. And Woody usually gets this point across pretty quickly. So if he's talking for 24 minutes, it's probably going to be a lot of content. So let's listen to this.
Hi everyone, today I want to talk about my wishlist for Diablo 4 Season 4.
We're going to play Last Epoch while we listen.
For a while now, we have been playing it, and we do know
How's
that
the volume,
a few
guys?
really dramatic changes are coming to the game in Season 4 already. For example, the itemization rework, most likely the codex update. If you don't know anything about those, well, the game is about to shift in a pretty big way. And I expect Season 4 to be a pretty big turning point for the game.
Loud and clear.
But outside of that, I feel there are a lot of low-hanging fruits out there that I just want to talk about right now in this video. I have a little document prepared here that I just put together basically in a few minutes off the top of my head, based on a lot of the discussions that I've had on stream with my community, with just things that I think
I use that same tactic, make
a
document.
I want to go through those points here. This is definitely not an exhaustive list, but I think a lot of kind of like small or easy fixes that could improve the game overall a lot.
I died in the gauntlet.
Stuff that's already coming. So
Big
I
bad
hope
wolf
that
killed me.
the D4 team is taking some notes here, if they have not already done so beforehand, or if, you know, these are some new points. But in general, I also want to just gather more feedback and, you know, see what we can actually deliver to the devs as kind of like a community and see what they can take out of this. As I mentioned, we already know a few things coming in Season 4, or at least some things are likely. I'm not sure if this is confirmed with the codex rework, for example, but aspects are going to be...
Let me pause here for a second. I want to get some context on one thing. Blizzard said in a campfire chat that they're going to involve content creators with like the big itemization revamp in Season 4. When Woody says, I think these things are coming, but I'm not sure, some people might think, oh, well, Woody actually knows, da-da-da-da-da. Of course, he's like pretending to not know. No, actually, well, unless Woody knows more than me, which I guess is possible, but we haven't really talked to Blizzard about exactly what's coming. Like, we don't know. So it's when Woody says that he's not sure, I believe him, because I don't know. So he's speculating here, and people think that we know. Well, as of February 10th, I don't know jack shit, so.
I'm not itemized anymore, they're only in the codex, and this means you can always imprint whatever you want, and you don't have to deal with like so much stash issues and these kind of things. So this is really cool. The itemization reworks are going to be massive, so I'm really looking forward to those. I have seen a very early preview, and a lot of other content creators have seen it already, and like some time ago.
That's what we saw.
It did look really cool. It did sound pretty cool.
We saw an early preview.
That, but I have no idea of the status of this right now. And then, of course, you're going to get items, theme, etc. But honestly, I really don't care too much about this part here in particular, with how big the changes are going to be in Season 4 anyway.
He doesn't care.
I think the theme could actually be somewhat of a, you know, afterthought in my book. But I guess you're going to see something cool there again. Now, let's talk about the stuff I actually want. So one thing that has definitely shown to be a problem is the Uber grind. So you have to farm Duriel like hundreds, even thousands of times. People do that, at least with dupe mats. That is somewhat realistic. Now, well, dupes are gone. And in general, the Uber grind is just boring at some point. So it's fine to do the Duriel grind, you know, every so often for a little bit. But personally, I farmed like around 400 or so Duriels last season. And that was in a rotation, of course. So, you know, I farmed up like around 100 Duriels myself and then multiplied them by ×4 in a party. And that is quite a grind. And now in Season 3, we also have the same Uber grind yet again. Now, there are some improvements coming to that very soon, I guess. Blizzard has already teased that we're gonna see, like, you know, we're gonna get something for the Uber Unix. But in the grand scheme of things, I guess it's still going to be the same old Duriel grind unless something major changes here. And
okay, so Woody's making like 2 critical points here, which I think are like literally everything. So the first part is he says that the Uber grind is not fun. So when I compare farming mats to fight Uber Duriel to running maps in PoE, to doing Mephisto runs or Pindleskin runs in Diablo 2, to even running monoliths in the last Epoch, the one that is the least fun for me and feels much more just like a chore and just going through the motions is the Diablo 4 thing. So I think that's probably the first point he made is the most important point. You could get everything wrong about farming Ubers. You get everything wrong about it. But if it was fun to do, fine. Then you would still probably in some ways have a win. But I think that that's the most important point that he made. Another thing that I've heard a million times from the community, this is much more from the community than me, because I'm a DJ and I can just sit here and stream and blast, and I can kill as many Durials as I want, whenever I want. People, when they logged into Season 3, they said, wait a minute, I did the massive Durial grind last season. I just realized something. Once I hit level 100, I'm just doing it again to get the same things that I already got, right? And in some ways, that's just how a season works. But again, it's a different feeling for, going through Mephisto runs to find a Shaco or an Aki or a Viper Magi versus do Helltide, then do this, then do that to get this thing, to look for a group to do that. Another problem, by the way, I don't know if Woody's going to talk about it, is the fact that it requires you to farm in a group. If you play solo, you lose like 4x the mats, and that's essentially forcing group play for the best items in the game, and that is a super major problem. So I think one of the most important things that they have to change is the way that you acquire the Uber Uniques. Killing Duriel all the time is not fun. A realistic but small chance to catch it in other fun endgame content would be a million times better. And as Woody said, they tease that they're going to change the Uber Uniques. So we can only hope to God that that's what they're going to do. And honestly, that's what I'm expecting from them.
I think we need something better. First of all, this needs to be more solo player friendly. Like we need a way
Yeah,
for
he says
solo
it right
players
there.
to,
Yeah.
at least at a somewhat acceptable efficiency, farm up those Uber Uniques and not be forced to go 4-man Duriel grind. So that is the main point here. And also the second point is we only have this one source of Ubers, really. We have no other bosses. Like, why don't they just make like some actual hard mode bosses of all of the bosses that we have? Like, we have Vashan, we have Grigor, etc.
And give us a chance to get it in the regular game,
like,
too.
maybe one or two of those.
Not
and then you can
one in a
actually
trillion chance.
Target one of them and actually grind exactly the Uber that you want for your build and not have everything on one boss where it's like full
what he's
RNG
describing is monolith target farming in last Epoch.
I think that could definitely change very easily, actually.
That's in this game right here.
Mode of all of those bosses, like a level 100 version, or even like higher than that, like a 125 version or so. Something that has like 20 times the HP, 10 times the damage, and is actually a bit of an encounter instead of you just walking in and one-shotting them. So there could be relatively easy solutions, I think, to this, and I think it's just a missed opportunity here. Also, similar, the T100 dungeons in the game right now are completely irrelevant with the changes in Season 3. So right now we get higher level loot in higher level Nightmare dungeons up until around level 90. In fact, even a bit before that, like even if you farm 85, for example, you're basically guaranteed 925 loot every single item, and there's not really a change in the loot anymore. So the last like 15, even up to 20 levels of difficulty are completely irrelevant right now. And I think that T100 should be a nice goal to have, a nice, like try to make your character strong enough to farm those kind of scenario. So I would really like to see something like an Uber drop chance for T100 Nightmare dungeons. This would be solo player friendly, as I had just described, but also it would actually give some relevance to gearing up your character strong enough, making a build powerful enough so it can blast through those T100s.
So I agree with what Woody is saying here. In my priority list, this would not be at the top of my list. Again, so what Woody is saying is absolutely true. He says, okay, Nightmare Dungeon 85 is good enough, and I think that the changes that they made in this season did make it better. I definitely think it's an improvement, because the only way you were getting 925 gear before is killing the world boss or doing Duriel. Once again, you're forcing me to do Duriel all day long. I can't even play your game. Now that the higher Nightmare Dungeons and the high vaults actually give you good gear, Now it's a little bit more of a reason to play it. And what Woody is saying here is the last 15 tiers are not aspirational content. You don't need to do them. You don't get any rewards for it. I agree that he's right, but that is absolutely not my priority. I don't need Blizzard to make the rewards better at the end of Nightmare Dungeons. I need you to make an endgame system that's fun. If you make Diablo 4 fun for me to log in and play, then I will play. And giving me better rewards at Nightmare Dungeon 100, that is not enough fun for me and a lot of people to come back. So this is definitely like a cherry on top, a nice thing for them to consider in conjunction with other things. But this would be probably lower on my priority list.
And if it's like, only on T100, there's like this, this guaranteed, like, you get the guaranteed sigils of T100 every time you complete one, for example. And you can kind of like, perpetuate the grind like this and keep blasting until you get something. So I think this would be a relatively easy solution, just put like Ubers in Nightmare Dungeons. Now, there's another big topic here, and that is old seasonal content. So I think it's a kind of big waste that we don't really have any leftovers of the previous season themes in the game. Okay, we have Varshan, there's like a one boss fight, and he's kind of irrelevant. And all the other stuff is kind of just gone. The Bloodseekers are gone, the Blood Tide is gone, the Million Tunnels are gone, and I expect the Vaults will be gone. So I just put this on the list here as well. And I think that is not how it works. So in my book, I think we should get back all of the stuff in Season 4. For example, Bloodseekers. I think Bloodseekers were amazing in Season 2. Like when they popped up in a dungeon and they were hunting you down and they were actually dangerous events. They were like, these super powerful elites. It was kind of cool. And especially because they scaled with the difficulty of the dungeon, they were actually like an interesting encounter, which is something that is really lacking in Diablo 4 right now. Like, okay, there's the Butcher, and then there's the Son of Malphas, and outside of that, there's no real, like, randomness, something, like, crazy happening, something, like, oh shit moment, basically. And Bloodseekers were exactly that, and they were excellent at this. And we do have Lord Zir as a boss in the game, and there is basically a reward that you can attach to those Bloodseekers, which is Lord Zir summoning materials, for example. So there could be a specific purpose to trying to actually defeat those Bloodseekers instead of just running away from them, for example.
Okay, so I will agree with Woody here, but I'm going to agree for kind of a different reason. So Woody's saying the team is not bringing back the seasonal content, and that's making Diablo 4 dull. One thing that they did bring back, by the way, were the rings. They did bring back the malignant rings, which were significant. Those rings are very good for many builds on Varshan. So that was kind of a way that they brought back malignant hearts, and we have nothing from vampires yet or whatever. I actually want them to bring back the content, but I want them, the thing that I care way more about than the content, than the Bloodseekers appearing or necessarily the Blood Helltide, which is not really a super endgame thing, although they could make it an endgame thing, is the progression systems. Give me something to work on my character. Give me something to do. The fact that I had to, it felt right in Season 2. They got it exactly right, where Season 3 got it horrifically wrong. Leveling up my vampire powers right away when I unlock the power at level 1, it's very strong. It's helping me right now, and I'm feeling good about it. It makes me feel good to farm it to level 2, because it wasn't. It was just right. It's not like the Three Little Bears, too cold or too hot. It was just right. The amount of time that I had to spend to get it to level 2, and then it felt better. It was noticeable, and it made me excited to get it to level 3. The UI that they had for upgrading it was terrible, but the tuning of it was fun. You can bring back some of the progression systems. PoE has this. Just when you think you've got your character built, no, Rax. You don't have your charms done. You don't have your jewels done. You don't have now you have your cluster jewels. No. You got to automate your flask. You got to do there's so many things to do in the game. How could you ever be done? In some ways, it can be overwhelming. A new player comes into PoE 10 years later. There's so many systems to upgrade. It actually gets in its own way eventually. There's too many things. Why can't I go in here? Wham, I'm crying. Okay, now it's letting me in. It can get it in its own way, and it can become too crazy at some point. But what I'm missing is someone left a comment on one of my videos, and they said, "You want to know why I stopped playing Diablo 4? It's because every new season that comes out, I feel like I'm doing exactly the same thing that I already did. I level to 100, I do the seasonal quest line, it gives me 2 or 3 powers, and then I farm Duriel 1,000 times. It's the same thing over and over and over. If you actually implemented different ways, different things to work on your character, then, well, over time, starting a season in Diablo 4, 10 seasons from now, would feel very different from starting a season right now. Because you have to think about, all right, the most important thing for me to do right now is unlock my critical vampire powers, because that helps me in the early game. I could ignore the pet for now because the pet doesn't help me early game. But at the end, I need to work on my vaults, because eventually when I can start spamming the high level vaults and I can open all 4 chests at the same time, then my pet can help me a lot, because they made him stay with me. They make the attack faster. There's different pets that I can pick because they improve the mechanic over time, da 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 da. And the actual game would feel different. Yes, the events are cool or whatever that Woody is talking about, and we definitely need more things to do in the game, but the Bloodseekers are just a red Helltide. There's green Helltide, blue Helltide, Sherbert Helltide is probably next. I'm more worried about adding depth to the game via actually building my character than just running around and doing, Maple Helltide.
I think this is something that should be in the game, at least bring back the Bloodseekers. Bloodseeker is still there, so you could tie it in lore-wise if you really want or something. And I think this would be an excellent solution, give people actually like a chance to target farm some of those Lord Seer mods at the same time, because right now Lord Seer is definitely a problem for people that want an item from that boss. And we just get something other, like some new cool stuff to do sometimes in those Nightmare Dungeons. In general, I think Nightmare Dungeons definitely need a lot more of the seasonal content in them, including the old seasonal content, because ultimately Nightmare Dungeons with the scaling difficulty are the only real content that we have right now, after you have decked out your character, after you are level 100 and you have everything. The outdoor content is just, irrelevant, like not in the sense that it's not useful to farm it because, Helltide exists and stuff like that, but in terms of difficulty. And the only real challenge you can have is in Nightmare Dungeons. So I think this stuff needs to go into the dungeons, and Bloodseekers are a perfect example here. And similar, we can have these old like Blood Seeker or these Blood Harvest events, for example, in dungeons. We had some back in Season 2. There were these vampire events that popped up here and there, and similar to those Bloodseekers, for example, they could drop those Seer summoning materials. And when you walk into a room and there's this event, then you can decide, okay, do I actually want to do this event or just want to skip it, go to the end, get my Glyph XP? And you actually have a bit of a choice to target farm a certain thing. Because right now, all these like dungeon events, yeah, they have been buffed and they're kind of nice for XP, but XP doesn't really matter anymore at some point, and then they don't give you anything. And I think we need more of this kind of like, choice in the dungeons. Okay, I see this event. Am I going to do it or not? I see these Bloodseekers. Would I try to fight them or just run away from them? And they can actually give you a specific, tangible and especially important reward. And well, the same with like the other seasonal themes here. So Malignant Tunnels, for example.
Okay, let me pause it here. So Woody is right again. Like, it's not just part of it is the rewards, but you need to make the Nightmare Dungeons much more interesting to run, much more fun to run. But my thought on it, I might be wrong on this. I'm not like 100% convinced, but I don't think Nightmare Dungeons, no matter how fun you made them, could be the only end game activity for how they've already started. Like, they've started on such a bad foot where you actually couldn't even port into the Nightmare Dungeon in the beginning that I think even if you made it a lot more fun, oh, we brought back all the events in Nightmare Dungeons, the rewards are better, or this or that, or this or that. Even if they removed all the doors and they took out all the stupid 30-second events in the middle of it and the freeing the 7 prisoners, that would certainly be a great start. But I'm not of the opinion this far into Diablo 4's lifespan that would be enough. I think we need multiple real end game activities that are fun. So yeah, like the point that he's making here, Nightmare Dungeons are probably going to be a staple forever, and they need to improve dramatically for all those different ways. But I also think people are just hungry for something else that isn't a Helltide and isn't Nightmare Dungeons. I think it's got to be more than just the fixes here.
I think it would be amazing if you walk into a Nightmare Dungeon and sometimes it's just like a Millennium Dungeon or something. This could literally be just an affix on the sigil as well. It could literally just say like the Exile Shrines, you know, this is infested with malignant growths or whatever, and similar with the Bloodseekers, you know, infested with vampires. And this could be, you know, even target farmable in that
what he's
sense.
describing is PoE, by the way.
These,
this is what PoE is.
And then you have, you know, maybe
this
somewhere
map has breach. This map has
like an event room.
Expedition.
It just leads to a
this is
tunnel.
PoE.
It's like a little like side area
right.
that you go into, and there's, you know, like 10 of those malignant elites. And every time you defeat one of them, there's like a, you know, 25% chance to drop one of the Varshan organs that you can use to summon the boss, for example. So again, similar to the Bloodseekers, I would like to actually have a reason to go and do those side events and, you know, find something interesting in those dungeons that is outside of just like blasting straight to the boss and that's it. And I think this is extremely low-hanging fruit here that we should get in the game. And likewise with the vaults.
One point here, real quick. Extremely low-hanging fruit. This is key. Like, Woody and I both have talked to Blizzard many times over the years, and you know, some other gaming companies about updating their game. And developers and gaming companies, which this is very logical, this is exactly how the world works. If they can do it with very little manpower, very little resources, and it would make an impact, they're much more likely to do so. So if I go up to Blizzard and I say, hey, Blizzard, I need you to make me a totally new endgame that's fun because I'm bored in Diablo 4. That ask is much more tremendous than, hey, you already made this endgame system. It's called Nightmare Dungeons, and I'm not having fun with it. But you made all this other content that's really fun that I like that you could put in Nightmare Dungeons, and it would make it a lot better. How about that? So I think it's important to call out that Woody's suggestions are probably wouldn't take too much time to implement, which is one of the reasons why they're very strong.
I don't know exactly what they could do, but I think it would be a waste to just throw them away. I think the Malphas fight is kind of interesting, and we should definitely keep Malphas in the game. And for that reason, I would also like to see the vaults. So, for example, maybe next season when you no longer have vaults as a season theme, maybe just like 1 in 20 Nightmare Dungeon sigils you find is randomly a vault sigil. And it's going to be at the same tier of, you know, the Nightmare Dungeon that you're running, for example. And then you can open this up and you can get Malphas mats to summon Malphas in those vaults. So let's say you start the run and you get a bunch of these Sultan Vault stacks, just like now. And let's say, okay, there's 15 stacks you need to have at the end of the run. Maybe you get 30 at the start, so you have to try to avoid the traps a little bit, but it's not like super try hard. And then you go and get a few of those rewards at the end, depending on how many stacks you kept. I think this would also be extremely easy to keep around. And we have Malphas as an extra endgame boss that is like similar level as like Duriel, for example, in terms of difficulty. And I really like the Malphas fight. So you just put a bunch of new uniques on Malphas, you have these vaults, and there you go. I think that would be cool. So I think there's really no reason to kind of like throw away all of the old season themes. I think they should really come back, and especially a lot of the stuff needs to go into Nightmare Dungeons just to beef up that content and make it much more interesting. So there's definitely like more things you could do.
Alphys
but
is all right.
obviously we don't want to have
Not
like,
in-
a
it's
full
okay. It's
rainbow
like
of,
another butcher.
Blood Tide, Hell Tide, whatever on
Better
the
than
map
nothing, I
active at all
guess.
times
It's
with arcane
very
tremors
has a
and all that
shitload
stuff.
of HP.
That is a bit too much, so there should definitely be
Maybe
like,
a bit
a
overtuned.
bigger focus on the actual season itself. But some of this old stuff can come back, and quite easily so. So this is kind of what I wanted to explain here with some ideas I had. Then we have the next point here, Hell Tide Brush Up. I was actually expecting this to happen in Season 3 already. After the massive success of the Blood Harvest in Season 2, I expected the dev team to just like sit down and just like do something with Helltide. Because it turns out, yeah, Helltide is more rewarding. We get Forgotten Souls now, and the chest is easier to get, and you see them on the map, and you can farm it all the time. That's kind of nice. But ultimately, I think Helltide needs a bit of a revamp. So it just needs more exciting stuff, basically. Like Blood Harvest was fun because there were those siphons, there were those Bloodseekers you could summon. There was always something going on, there were whispers. It was just nice, it was kind of complete. And Helltide is, it doesn't feel very hellish most of the time. Okay, you have like the fire raining down, and there's a bunch more extra demons and stuff. But ultimately, the difficulty is very low. There's nothing going on. Kicks off is a joke. It's just a punching bag that is annoying and nothing else.
So, I mean, I agree with Woody, but again, I'll make like a side comment here. Like, Helltide could definitely be more interesting. I think the way that they made the Vampire Helltide was more interesting than regular Helltide. But I'm going to go back to what I said in my early launch video, even though they've made a bunch of improvements to Helltide since then. In my opinion, when Diablo 4 released, there were two things that worked pretty well in the game. The first was the campaign. That's one of the main redeeming qualities about the game. Casuals and even veteran players really enjoyed the campaign, and some casual players aren't even through the campaign, so they're still loving Diablo 4, and they are either oblivious to the feedback that people don't like the endgame, or they listen to it and they just don't care. That's fine. But out of everything that they had, the nightmare dungeons, the uber bosses weren't there, the different ways to level up, the strongholds, the renown grind, I think one of the only things that pretty much worked from the beginning was Helltide. It was a pretty dense zone of monsters that you just slaughter mercilessly with some events where you can target farm certain items based upon what you need to open up, and open those mysterious chests gave you a valuable reward that you needed in the game. So yes, it's kind of like my feedback with what Woody said earlier about making the last 15 tiers and tier 100 of Nightmare Dungeons better. This would certainly be a great improvement to the game, but making Helltide better, again, is not at the top of my list. For me, Helltide is one of the only things that I don't mind doing. I go to Helltide, I get on my mount, and I'm going to slaughter 2,000 monsters in 30 minutes, and I'm going to open some pretty valuable chests and do a couple of events along the way, and maybe I'll run into a boss, and I'll pick some flowers. To me, this is not the event that needs a massive overhaul.
So at the very minimum, for Kickstarf, it could deal like triple the damage and have no days maybe. So that would be great. And just in general, maybe there's like some portals popping up similar to those vampire siphons from Blood Harvest, for example. And you go there, you activate the portal, there's like, 200 demons charging out and you have to defend against them. Or, there's like some mini boss that spawns that is actually like highlighted on the map. And,
all this would be good, just not at the top of my list.
Bosses appearing,
all this would be
like
good.
50 cinders and 10 forgotten souls, and then everyone rushes there and try to get it or something. I think there just needs to be more stuff going on basically in Helltide. It's not enough density, not enough fun, not enough difficulty. I really wouldn't mind if like the monster level is also raised a bit more.
There's no difficulty, that's for sure. There's no difficulty there.
+5 or even +10, so it actually also is somewhat
nothing is
relevant
difficult
for
in
experience
Helltide
farm, for example, and just feels a bit more like threatening. So this is mostly what's missing here. There's nothing really that interrupts the grind a little bit. Something like
maybe you have a rare chance in Helltide and killing a monster to open a portal to Uber Helltide.
Especially with Helltide
and it's extremely hard with way better rewards.
Very minor fix here, but very important one in my opinion. Separate inventory for sigils. The consumable tab is just piling up more and more stuff with all the consumable like boss materials, for example, and we might get more next season for the new bosses and for Malphas and whatever. And I don't understand why this is not a thing already, so I think this is pretty self-explanatory here. Just give us a...
So to me, on that point, I would encourage Blizzard to not solve this problem piece by piece by piece. This is how Diablo 4 launched. Diablo 4 launched with a couple of stash tabs, barely any, and every single thing that you pick up gets vomited into that stash tab. Everything. Your items, your legendary aspects, your potions, every consumable, every season event thing. It all gets vomited into there, and there's not very much room to begin with. So I would ask for this update here, I would like you to reimagine like all of it. So Woody's saying like we need a separate tab for consumables or whatever. We also need the fix for the legendary aspects to be upgraded within the codex. Need you to take the entire UI of it, the entire concept of acquiring items and stashing them, and put it on a whiteboard in front of the entire team, come up with whatever your vision is for how that's going to look in Diablo 4, and implement the entire thing. So it was okay that you moved the jewels to being salvaged, and then they go into your material tab. Stuff like that is good, but when it comes to the actual overhaul of the stash space, I would much prefer that the team goes for something big here, where stash space is completely borderline reimagined and just throwing everything into a big wooden chest. And again, that might be a big ask. Woody's ask is a lot easier than mine, but it's such an important topic for people that I think it requires a ton of attention and thought.
This digital inventory, please. Thank you. Then solo self-found tag. So I'm not really sure if this will make it into the game in Season 4 or not, but I just wanted to put this out here because I feel this would be also a somewhat small solution, but something that would make many people, including myself, very happy, and would also allow much more easily to run community events. And this is the main reason why I actually want to put this on this list here, for kind of like a I want this early and not in 3 years kind of thing. So solo self-found is the way of life for many players that either don't want to play with friends or don't have friends.
You need to add
with,
this into the game.
It's just like how
needed to be on launch.
And if there's any kind of option
this is
like
required
that,
for ARPGs these days.
So
it's
this
just a
means
requirement.
No
needs
grouping,
to be in the game.
And it doesn't really need like any extra rewards or anything like that. It just needs to have this tag. You need to have like a separate stash for that character, for example, so you can't take it from your original stash. But outside of that, it doesn't really need all that much to work already. And this would be, immensely helpful, especially for, the community events, for races, for any kind of stuff like that, just to like have very easy verification methods and just to like show off your achievements as a solo player. Because, yeah, let's face it, Diablo 4 is a very easy game, and I understand why. And I hope that in the future we're gonna get more high-end stuff, and I guess we will. But in the grand scheme of things, just showing off that you have done everything by yourself with this one character is just a really cool thing to do and something to strive towards for players. So this is why we need this. Then we have world bosses and legions. So this is another point here. I feel like they're just like undertuned, and okay, it's kind of nice to just go there and, have some easy grind and get some reward for it. But ultimately, I feel like they are just like, yeah, too boring, to be honest. Like, especially world bosses, like they either just get one shot, or even if they don't kill them very fast, they're just not threatening at all. There's like these big massive demons that appear, and in World Tier 1 and World Tier 2 they actually wreck you. Like when you're like level 30, you go there, you can actually get one tapped or two tapped by those bosses.
They're
and
tough
then you go
in
to
the
World Tier 4
early
and
world tiers.
It just feels like they do the same damage as in World Tier 2. Like it just doesn't do anything to my character. Like there's no way to die in World Tier 4, I feel. Like, even if my armor is not capped, like, these guys just don't hurt you, really. So it's just kind of strange how they stop scaling, or just they don't scale enough with, like, the actual defenses that the higher level character has. So I think that needs to be, like, revamped a little bit. The game just, in general, gets easier as you go. But also, I think world bosses, being those kind of massive demons, massive threats, I think they should just, be a bit more beefed up, to be honest. Especially on
Well, Woody's a much better player than most people. When Woody shows up to any boss fight, he's gonna kill it every time, and his understanding of basic concepts of the game exceeds almost everyone. So when Woody says you can't get hurt by a world boss, even if Woody doesn't go in with capped armor, he's going in with a good Paragon board, a good build that synergizes. He's dodging all of the mechanics. So I'm sure. I mean, it's the same for me. I'm not gonna die to a world boss either, but I think other people may not feel that way. They may feel like the world bosses are dangerous, but the thing is Diablo 4 currently is in general made for the casual player, the couch dads with 7 jobs and 30 kids. They can play for 5 minutes a month, and that's who it's designed for, right? So I don't think the world bosses are ever going to be like extremely difficult, but one thing that I think they could do once they balance, I mean, this is a bit big ass, but once they balance around, the Hoda barbs of the world that go in there and just crack them and kill them in one hit, I think you could just, again, simply give them more life, because the fight lasts, I don't know, like 5 seconds. 5 seconds with anybody who's pretty powerful there. Even with a full party, he'll take care of it, no problem. Right now, world bosses are just loot pinatas. Because even if you are a player that doesn't have a perfect build and you can take damage from the world boss, almost certainly once you get far enough into World Tier 4, someone's going to be there who is just going to be able to carry you. The experience in World Tier 1 or World Tier 2 is much more what I would like to feel like in the end game for some pretty damn good rewards. People were asking me, I was racing, even though there's no race, at the start of Season 3. If I wasn't in first place, I think I was at least top 3. People were asking me when the world boss was coming up, Rax, are you going to go to the world boss? And I said, hell no, we're going to get shit on. They'd be like, what? You're high enough level, you can kill it. Yeah, I'm going to go there and I'm going to have to kill it for everybody else. That's what's going to happen. And there ain't no way we're doing that. So at least it's kind of a choice at that point, right? It's like it's not just this free loot pinata, which I don't think does anything for the game. Some casuals would disagree. No, Rax, don't you dare tell them that. You and Woody, you better not tell them that I can just go there for 5 seconds and get a big stash of loot. But I don't think that's good design. And again, as Woody has been pointing out, I think it's kind of low-hanging fruit. So I would really hope that they take a look at that a little bit more with the design, especially as they continue to balance the builds.
On the damage side. And maybe the rewards as well, of course, why not? And lastly, I have this here, buff Whispers XP in World Tier 1 and 2. This is mostly just for the early game, for the early leveling. Whenever you start a fresh character, I always tell people, go domain tunnels. And, maybe do the seasonal quest line, of course. But this is basically the meta right now. It's domain tunnels or what, or bust. And even if they nerf that dungeon in particular, we're going to find the next best dungeon. They're going to go to Uldra's Cave or whatever. So ultimately, I feel like I just want to level Whispers, and it's just not competitive. And there's also no reason to do Whispers. We don't get any Varsha mats in World Tier 2, for example. And that's okay, but I'd at least like to do something more than just domain tunnels. So in Season 1, for example, they removed the Renown grind. And personally, I was a pretty big Renown enjoyer because it just gave you something to do at the season start. Like, I was actually going around to different places, to different dungeons, and I actually saw a lot of the game there. And now I only see like one dungeon and the seasonal quest line. And I think that's kind of a mistake with this big, expansive game that we have. So I would like to see Whispers buffed. I would like to see maybe some other new stuff there that would be rewarding and to do like something to do at the low levels as well that actually helps the character progress later.
I agree with what Woody said here. I think that it's become a very singular way to level up. I do this all the time. I live in the dopamine tunnels. Other methods, they have buffed them to try to make them more competitive. I think dopamine tunnels still just wins. I do not think the solution is to nerf dopamine tunnels for exactly the same reason that Woody said. Well, there's multiple reasons. What he said is we'll just find another way to do it, which we will. That's a guarantee. But also, the pace of dopamine tunnels feels pretty good to me. So when that's the best thing to do, and everything else is trying to get buffed up to the level, but it's not quite meeting it, if you take this away, we'll just find another one. Like, it actually might be Older's Cave or Blind Burrows, not sure. Gulron Canals is good as well. But it they do this all the time. They nerf the main thing and they pray that that's the solution. But when the main thing feels good, it's more of how do you bring the other things to its level. Now, when you're talking about character builds, they say nerfing the Hoda barb that's 100 times better than everything else is the easier solution. That makes perfect sense. That's a completely different conversation, because builds are a lot more intricate and they have a lot more moving parts and factors to them. But when we're talking about just a simple event, I go to a whisper, I do these things, it takes me this amount of time, we go to the Tree of Whispers and we turn it in. I guarantee you, me or Woody or 1,000 other content creators, or not even a content creator, just anybody, could spend one day running whispers, make an Excel spreadsheet, calculate the XP per hour, go to the tree, go to the turn in, calculate also the items that you get, starting level, ending level, try it on a couple of builds, then do the same test on dopamine tunnels, and I can give you a mathematical answer that's within 10 percentage points of the correct answer of how much better the dopamine tunnels is. You factor in that the Whisper gives you a little bit better rewards, so maybe you don't make the XP equal, and maybe you buff the Tree of Whispers to 90% of the XP to dopamine, and then all of a sudden, unless you're a world number 1 racer, then all of a sudden the Whispers are super competitive and feel very good to run. It's just a simple math problem. It doesn't take that much data to calculate it. It doesn't take that many data points to get almost the right answer. You got to run 500 runs to get the right answer, but you only have to run 15 runs to get within 10% of the right answer, which is good enough. People would not notice the difference. Definitely a low-hanging fruit here.
And lastly, I want to talk about some other stuff here, stretch targets. So just something that I believe is most likely not making it into Season 4, but I just want to reiterate this here as a long-term goal perhaps for the devs. And as something that I think a lot of people would also like to see. Number one, I guess it's pretty obvious, loot filters. Now, it seems like to me that the fall team has the idea that with the itemization changes, we don't need a loot filter, but I think ultimately we still really want a loot filter. So I think this is just inevitable, especially with power creep coming in, especially with new content and, new rewarding stuff coming in and so on. And just in general, if you have a decked out level 100 character, you don't want to go around and just, pick up items anymore at some point, or at least not most of them. So if they keep going with this kind of vomit items at you at the end of a vault run, for example, and your entire inventory is full of stuff. So unless you get a massive reduction, 80-90% reduction in loot, I think we need loot filters. And as the game matures and we get more and more different items, etc., we need them, I think. So it is definitely something that should make its way into the game, regardless of how the itemization system works in the end, I believe. And this could even be something relatively simple. And
so one point that I'll add to Woody's comment here about loot filters, I think he was maybe in a way saying this already, but so Blizzard is going to redo itemization in Season 4. And they say, well, we're not going to put a loot filter in the game right now because we need to see if we need a loot filter after we change everything. If we made a loot filter right now and we change itemization, then we're just going to have to rebuild it anyway, which makes no sense. I can agree with that, and that's fine. But for a reason that I think maybe Woody was kind of alluding to here, I think you're going to have to put in a loot filter anyway. I think this day and age in ARPG requires a loot filter for the simple reason of it allows the user to customize their experience in the game. The whole point of playing these ARPGs is to kill monsters and acquire loot. The way that you give people a choice in how they kill monsters is you add very interesting events for them to do that are completely different, and then they can choose how they kill monsters. For example, in Path of Exile, you can go mapping, or you can go into Delve, or you can do Blight, or you can do this, or you can do that. That's how they give you a choice in how you play the game. But one of the main ways to give me a choice in how I interact with loot besides crafting is how does the loot drop on the ground and how do I pick it up? Let me give you an example. Some people love the loot explosions. They like seeing loot everywhere, within reason. They filter out the absolute garbage. But people like to clear a map and say, holy shit, 1,000 items dropped. And, oh yeah, I could maybe use this one day. I'm a hoarder. Okay, I want that. All right, I'm going to go through. I'm going to spend 10 minutes picking up all this juicy loot I got. And I'm feeling good about it. Fine. If that's how you like to play, great. I'm the complete opposite of this. I want to filter out everything that isn't godly. I don't want you to show me anything unless it's good. And then I want to actually be excited for when stuff does drop. That's how it's fun for me. The only real way that I can create both experiences in the same game is with a loot filter. That's the only way. So it's not just about being able to filter out bad items. No, Rax. The new changes will allow you to see what's a good or bad item way faster. No, Rax. We reduced the number of loot just like you asked. You don't need a loot filter. I still think you need it for the ability to customize the way that loot drops on the ground. I think that's an undervalued aspect of the game.
Needs to be inside the game. I think Last Epoch is a good example here. They have built a pretty badass in-game loot filter system that is easy to use, easy to understand. And
here it is,
it
by
just
the way.
allows for a lot of customization with, a few minutes of investment. And
Yes.
we don't even need anything remotely as complicated as that because of Diablo 4's loot system just being like, way tuned down in complexity. So even something very simple could help us out a lot here. Then we have loadouts. I think this is also a pretty major request. So I'm just gonna say this real quick. Diablo 3 had the option to save an entire build and then you can swap between them on your character. So that is kind of cool. And a lot of people want that in Diablo 4. And well, right now it wouldn't really work, I guess, just with the way the game works because of the aspects, etc. But especially with this coming to the game, the Codex rework, and basically every single item that you have being almost like a canonized cube slot, basically, I think we could definitely see loadouts. So maybe you do like a one-time payment to purchase a loadout slot, or maybe there's like a small fee for swapping your loadout every time so that you can't abuse it, or just
I thought he was talking about putting it in the shop.
But I think ultimately we need something like that just to go.
He's talking about payment within the game.
Button, and then you change your build and you can actually save multiple things at once. So that would be amazing. And something that I think a lot of people would
Loadouts are good. They originally said they would never do that.
I don't want to go the Diablo 3 route with, making Torment 16 and all that stuff. But I think one extra difficulty would definitely be useful for the game. Something where it's a bit more challenging in general. Something where it's a bit more rewarding in general. For example, I just put this number here, tier 89 dungeon difficulty. Do not put it to the highest difficulty in the game, like tier 100 dungeons. But the thing is that currently, if I do ever any kind of Helltide farming, any kind of Whisper farming, it's all useless trash items that I find in those types of content because they are not tier 90 9 dungeons or tier 80 plus 9 dungeons. Right now, it's so easy to acquire 925 loot, and all the stuff I find in open world is not 925 or anywhere remotely close to that. And it's also just at some point you're just overpowering the content so hard that all you care about is go fast, go speedy, and everything just explodes on the screen. And you can even make that happen all the way up to tier 100 9 dungeon difficulty with the right build these days. So I think that just beefing up the outdoor content, also giving this kind of higher level bosses, or these hard mode versions of the bosses, and actually some place. I think World Tier 5 could be a really good opportunity here to have the Uber Varshan, Uber Gigar, etc. And all those bosses have a chance to drop Uber uniques, for example. Maybe the Whispers, every time an organ drops, there's a 25% chance to get an extra organ. Every time that you find a Forgotten Soul, there's a 25% chance of get an extra Forgotten Soul. Just something to give you a bit of an incentive to actually go into this World Tier 5. It doesn't need to have like a new tier of items like ancestrals or uber ancestrals or whatever. It just needs to have, not monsters that just die one shot to everything, and just a bit more rewards basically. So this is something I would like to see here.
So we talked about this 10 million times in Diablo 3. People give you the same suggestions a million times, and this is just something that I've never understood why people say this. So in Diablo 3, the highest GR tier was 150. The rumors that the reason why is because of technical limitations is true. I talked to Blizzard about it. You actually can't go higher than GR 150 because of integer overflow. That's like the cap. So people would always say, Rax, why doesn't Blizzard just add more GRs than GR 150? And it never made any sense to me why anyone would suggest that. That would solve absolutely nothing. And what people are really asking for is they want to not hit the cap. They want the leaderboards to be based upon whoever gets the highest clear and not who clears 150 the fastest. But first of all, they can't add more GR tiers. But if they added 500 GR tiers, I don't understand how anyone views this as a solution. It's the exact same thing as in don't make the builds clear 150 in 20 seconds. You gave everything a 60,000% multiplier, and then we went from like rank 1 clear in season 1 being like a GR 58 to the rank 1 clear in season 30 or whatever clearing GR 150 in 60 seconds. It's the problem is not adding more GR tiers. The problem is the scaling of the damage. Now, what Woody is talking about here is a little bit different with adding World Tier 5, because he's asking for actually different things to occur within World Tier 5. It's like a different inflection point, which he's right. You go through the normal game, and once you get your pretty good loot, the other loot has no value. So why do you run it there? One of the ways to make it valuable would be to add a crafting system, because then you could give low, mid-tier crafting mats a rare chance for an expensive crafting mat, and then all of a sudden, kind of like PoE does with all their different currencies, even when you're doing the low-tier trash content that can't drop you anything actually good, at least you're building up the bubblegum currency, and that matters. It will matter to you when you get there. So that's why the entire game feels a little bit valuable. But there are plenty of games that don't do this, that have everything feel very valuable. You do not need to do this. World of Warcraft doesn't have World Tier 1, 2, 3, and 4. You just play the damn game. And if you step from the Barrens into the wrong zone, into Thousand Needles, when you're too low of a level, I don't need to do World Tier 2 shit to you at all. You're going to get clapped. You're going to get farmed. If you go in with your guild into Blackwing Lair and you haven't even cleared ZG or whatever, you haven't cleared Molten Core, I don't need to give Blackwing Lair a different tier, like an official tier. You're going to get shit on. You're going to get farmed. I can just make the game harder. PoE does this. Other than labeling the maps from white, yellow, and red with a progression system there, you don't ever enter world tier, a different world tier there. It just doesn't happen. So I'm not even super in love with the entire concept of world tiers. You can just design the game just to get progressively harder, and when you get to the higher spot, it's just harder.
Yeah, and this also wraps it up. So as I mentioned, this is just a small list that I made here, but something where I think, a lot of like kind of easy fixes, kind of like a few ideas I want to throw out there. Of course, I'm not really involved with the development process. I don't really know what they have planned with, all the details. I know a few things, but just some stuff that I think should make its way into the game if I could decide. So let me know what you think. Maybe you have more to add to this list. Maybe there's, some other things that you would like to see short term. This is kind of like a short term list here that I made. And of course, we want 1,000 things in this game. And over time, I think they will arrive. This is what I think should happen first. So that's it for this video here. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know your thoughts, and let's see what happens.
So what we were doing there, guys, is we were watching Woody's Diablo 4 wishlist for Season 4. Woody is one of the best players ever. He's one of the best ever in Diablo 4. He's one of the best ever in Diablo 3. He's good at WoW. He's good at PoE. He's good at every game. He's a good friend of mine. Competed against him and competed on his team millions of times. He's a major contributor to Maxroll. He's a good friend of mine. It's a really good video. Like always, he always has good ideas. You guys should follow him. You guys should like his video. I learned this one from Asmongold, where you spam it 1,000,000 times. If you guys want to go give him a like. And another thing that I can tell you, I can't say this about everybody. I'll say one more thing about Woody. Woody behind closed doors is actually a genuinely nice guy. He's just a nice guy. He doesn't have some alternate persona. He logs off and, oh, he turns into this mean, ugly person. He's not like that. He's actually a genuinely nice guy. You should support Woody.